Welcome to Nuanced Beauty. This podcast is intended to be a spot where my husband Bill and I will capture some complex thoughts and challenge us to hold to our opinions loosely so that we can see the beauty in others and the beauty in ourselves. I want to challenge us to dive deeper into those everyday topics and those sticky topics that we might shy away from, or we might bulldoze over others with our opinions. Because I think there's wisdom in this idea that if we all thought exactly the same, there would be no need for anyone else. So let's have a conversation and let's get nuanced. Hey guys.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome back to Nuanced Beauty. Bill and I are here, and today we're going to talk about work-life balance. So I was chatting with a girlfriend recently, and she shared that at her company they had an event for some of the gals, and she said they had a teaching on finance that was super boring. But the first half was very interesting. They talked about work life balance, and the speaker in particular was pretty accomplished on the career front. But she shared this concept of rather than thinking about it as work life balance, which has kind of this rigid separation between work and life, and that they're just totally separate. She introduced this idea of trying to integrate the two, and my friend had shared this example about if you're going on a business trip and you go out to dinner with your coworkers, like you spend a lot of the time every day with your coworkers. So your coworkers are your friends or they're your enemies, and then your life really is miserable.
That reminds me of when we first started doing CrossFit, and everyone was like Facebook friends with the coach. I'm like, why would he want, like, he's at work. Why would he want to be friends with me on Facebook? He's like, we're
This is
coworkers.
weird.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is
you're
weird.
like,
Like, he's
I
at
pay
work
you for
right now.
service,
Why
and
would
you're
we
at work.
want,
Yeah,
like,
this
why would,
divide.
like, you're cool and stuff. Like, we could hang out. But why would you want to be friends with me? Like, you're at work right now.
Yeah. But so this concept, and that's where I think it would get blurry too. The work life concept is different fields, different careers that blends more, right? Like if you're in ministry, if you're a counselor, if you're a teacher, like I think there's a little more of a blur.
Teacher, coach, anything that surrounds has a basis in
People
community.
faced, yeah,
Community.
community, yeah. Um, but yeah, no, this idea that the gal talked about was integrating rather than keeping it separate, because you're probably friends with your coworkers. So if you go out to dinner, like view it as, hey, I'm going out to dinner with friends. And then if you go sightseeing, like just consider it like you're doing life, and it's not just a work
Which is
thing.
hard, and I get why it's hard, because we like to think of friends as permanent. We grew up thinking that life was forever, and your job is not permanent. In our generation, our job is not permanent. In our parents' generation, is a little bit different. But
Yeah.
we've job hopped so much that our coworkers are very temporary, especially in the field you and I have been in the maritime industry.
Yeah, you're so intimately, like you live on the boat and you
But
know
for
each
that
other.
75 days, and then you
Yeah.
never see these people again.
Yeah, like you know everybody's life story and everything, but then like you leave.
And
And if you
that's
get on a regular rotation,
in different
right?
generations, different parts of the industry, that can be different. But
Yeah.
in our experience, it was very single serving. Now, if any of this sounds familiar, we did touch on this a little bit in the retirement episode, which you haven't listened to, go back to. It's a great episode where I we had this pastor, well, not even pastors, is a guy from our church who would speak sometimes, um, talk about work life balance and about how there is no such thing as work life balance because you're alive all the time. Like, you're
Mm-hmm.
there for like a third of your life. If you just think of that as not part of your life, you're wasting
A third
a
of your
third
life.
of your life.
Yeah.
And like, I kind of thought that was a lot of hokum at the time in my
Mm-hmm.
20s, and then I grew up a little bit. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I spent a lot of my time there. I have to accept that is part of my life,
Mm-hmm.
and not try to push it away, or else you're just miserable. And even if you are miserable, it's still your life. You're still there. That still has
It's part of you.
value.
Uh-huh.
Your life has value. Like, you need to be there while you're there, which is why in that episode, I think, no, we recommend a different book. That's why we talk about Be Here Now on a different podcast. Like,
Mhm.
you, so yeah, we've already touched on this a little bit in that episode. We want to expand on it a little bit here
Yeah,
because of this conversation.
and particularly like just this concept, right? Work life balance. So to me, I was kind of reflecting on it, and I brush up against that phrase. I don't love it. And I just I wonder if the phrase came out of in the midst of trying to have it all and be super successful in your career, people felt this subtle sense of guilt because they were spending too much time at work, or they felt like they were missing out on other parts of their life because work seemed so pivotal and so foundational and important. And I wonder if that just, made people feel bad, and then maybe companies, maybe some HR person out there was like, "Oh, you know what? We need to promote our company because we
Have work life
have
balance,
work-life
and it's a
balance."
great way for a company to avoid paying their people. I got an email from uh, a higher up in my company, who I'm not going to say my company in this episode. Uh, that it was this long article. He sent it on a Friday afternoon
Uh-huh.
that said the number one reason why people leave their jobs is for the pay. The pay is the number one reason. It's
Uh-huh.
like 2 or 3 paragraphs about it. The number one reason is pay. But that shouldn't preclude us from thinking about what the second and third reasons are.
Uh-huh.
And the whole rest of the article is about why work life balance and amenities and perks and benefits,
Flexibility and
flexibility.
benefits.
That's really the most important thing. No, you said the right thing in the first paragraph.
Yeah.
We all know that's the most important thing, but let's spend the whole rest of our time talking about this other thing. 'Cause, the other thing that doesn't cost us money. So we're
Yeah.
going to talk about
This is
that.
qualitative. And we would say that it does matter, right? Like, because that's what we're saying is it does matter how you view your work and how you view your life. And your work is part of your life. But I feel that the one thing that I don't love about like the concept of, I don't know, just the work life balance is, I think that we are finite, and I think that this we can have balance. I'm not so sure about. I think that we make choices and we get to choose and we get to justify why we make that choice, whether it's a value or it's I need money or I want to live this lifestyle or I want this power and prestige in a job professional setting. But we're doing that and we're spending our time and our energy and our resources in that method at the expense, potentially, or the trade-off, because this isn't necessarily a value
Well,
judgment of
the word
negative
is
or
opportunity
positive.
cost.
Yeah, opportunity cost, right?
Hmm.
Like the trade-off there is that is potentially time that you weren't spending on a hobby, you weren't spending with friends, going out to dinner, or were a solid workout routine, or being home, or doing family stuff. Like those are all opportunities that you have too. And I think that I kind of prefer the mindset of I'm making this choice and there is a trade-off here. And I think that when I preface it in that way in my own mind, I appreciate, like, I made this decision and it's a good decision for these reasons. And I also appreciate what I'm getting out of this and when I do get to spend time in this other area besides work.
Yeah, I think you butt up against frustration and not having the time to do everything you want to do.
Mhm.
There's a low level anxiety. Well, I think what makes you maybe different is that you balance or try to balance the things that you choose to do and the things that you can't do because you chose to do, and the opportunity cost, working versus being with your children versus working out, and
Mhm.
and that causes some level of anxiety in you, or level of anger, because you access anger very quickly. But you're a woman, right?
Yes.
But most of the women you talk to
Ah, yeah.
deal more in guilt, and you've observed this in
Yes.
your peers.
Yes.
So how much do you think that ties into this angst about work life balance versus how maybe you might view this? Like,
That could be very much the case because I just don't I don't operate out of a sense of guilt for things that I shouldn't feel bad about. Like I made a decision and I moved forward in that decision. And so kind of that could be there could be some discord there for me because I think this concept feels like it's kind of generated out of like a female
It's
specific
I
more so.
it's generated out of the cover of the Atlantic magazine from 2017
Really?
that had the CEO of whatever company standing in her business suit in the Wonder Woman pose in front of you at home. I'm doing a Wonder Woman pose now with one boob out and a toddler breastfeeding on her breast as she's like having it all.
Work life balance? Is that where? No way. It's
There's no
been
work
over
life
how
balance. You have
longer
work
than
and
that.
life 100% all the time. And that's the expectation that is placed on you
Mhm.
as a woman in 2023 that you should be able to do both.
Yeah. And I would just say, no, like you're finite, like
Hmm.
you make choices and do your things. And if you don't like how you're doing your things, make a different choice. That sounds way easier than it probably is,
Hmm.
but evaluate your life and be intentional and like don't be stuck. Like
Hmm.
choose not to be stuck or change your mindset if you are stuck because you're not stuck. You're in a spot and it's a good spot.
Yeah. Yeah, you have
Yeah.
this mindset of you do you, man, and stand on your own and don't give a shit what people think. Don't give a crap what people think. Don't explicit tag me,
Uh-huh.
Spotify.
Uh-huh.
Um, Whereas I've seen on from a male perspective, there is this strong hammering of on your gravestone. Is it going to talk about your work accolades? Or I've never seen a man on a deathbed say, "I wish I'd spent more time at work." There's a strong pressure to be more involved in the home that I think my parents' generation didn't have. Same way
Mm-hmm.
that our parents' generation didn't have this expectation that women should raise children and be at work. There's this expectation of men that we should be working, but also involved in the home.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that societal expectation, and part of that is just learning from the wisdom of our parents. When we worked in the shipyard, uh, when you were pregnant with Zeke,
Mm-hmm.
I would bounce off out of work to go to your appointments. I didn't miss any of your appointments. That was super important to me that I went to your appointments.
Uh-huh.
And I was afraid how I'd be perceived in the shipyard at first,
Yeah.
of like leaving, and these old crusty shipyard guys would be like holding me on the shoulder like, "Good for you, son. I wasn't there for my son,"
Uh-huh.
and they're thrice divorced because of it. So there's a lot of like
Be
old
more
men trying not to cry.
uh
So now there's this
the
work life.
pendulum has swung.
There's a pendulum swing, but I feel like there's this equal and opposite thing happening in men and women where there's
We're
this
both being
drop.
called.
We're both being called to be both things at the same time. There's a lot of Atlantic articles about women having it all, but there's um this also from the male perspective, like, no, we're still expected to do all things men are expected to do. We're supposed to work and provide and do all these things, but we're also supposed to be present and caring fathers and husbands in a way that
Mm-hmm.
ancestrally we weren't. Where our job was to from the time of Adam go work in the fields
Whether it was
and
gather or farm or
master
hunt
those
or
thorns.
yeah. Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
and so in my workplace, there's this strong push to disconnect from work because they recognize, especially in my profession as a port engineer, that people burn out. Because,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, you cannot do two things well.
Mm-hmm.
Don't half-ass two things. Whole-ass one thing.
Or adjust your expectations and half-ass everything totally.
Adjust your expectations on how big of an ass you have.
Too many curse words.
So
Go ahead.
there's this push in my company to be here now, which longtime listeners of this podcast would know that's a book that's very important to me. But it's kind of thrown out as this corporatist catchphrase, and it's not possible in my job because my vessel got underway from Tampa at 20:30 tonight. I got a text from the chief saying that everything's good. I'm like, all right, thanks. And I texted my vendor who did some work on my boat while we have company in our house. That's a thing that I had to do tonight.
Right. But there is also like with your job, what I was going to say about the whole 24/7 thing is that uh like, yeah, you're on call, but you also have the right demeanor to do it where you're not going to be overly committed. And when something super significant happens, like we're on the same page where it's like, yeah, you need to check out for the next 3 hours because you actually have to make a bunch of phone calls and you have to coordinate getting vendors lined up, getting them over to your ship and take care of business. But it's like you then another day you won't work like the full day, or if you're traveling to a boat you're not going to go into the office in person on Tuesday and Thursday, so you are able to potentially check out or accept interruptions, like when a call happens during dinner time. Whereas, like, I think other personalities would not be inclined to handle the constant, overarching potential for your work to come up at any hour.
Yeah, I've had coworkers who would turn to at like 4 in the morning and work until 10 at night because they feel like they always need to be on. And I'm very skilled at not working. I didn't put that on my resume, but I actually consider it one of my greatest strengths.
Uh huh.
That I'm very good at not working. You wouldn't have known I sent that text had I told you about it. Because to be honest, I don't care about my job that much. I care about the people who I'm in charge of caring for.
Uh-huh. And yeah, you wanna do a good
I
job, but
want
it's
to do,
not a.
yeah, I want to do well. Who doesn't want to do well? They want to do good at the thing. But I think the most important thing is that our expectations are in a line, and I need to consistently be grateful that you aren't an indomitable shrew about like me getting up in the middle of dinner and taking a phone call because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
could be, and you aren't, and I love you.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
valid.
that's super important
But that's
because
where,
not all my
like,
coworkers have that same privilege.
yeah. But that's where the work-life balance goes awry, because it's like, well, is it really, quote, unquote, "a balance"? Because a balance, it suggests there's an equilibrium, and it's like, no, there's not. Like, there's a choice, and there's a time, and there's an effort, and it is what it
Well,
is.
right, like the idea of the 9 to 5 workday came out of the union movement of the early 20th century. Prior to that, you worked like all the time. There wasn't a 5 day work week. You had a job or you died. And so this idea that we have work hours that are, the 8 hours for work, 8 hours for leisure, 8 hours to rest, that was a specifically union movement in the
Mhm.
early 1900s.
Mm.
That's in the scope of human history, pretty new.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, so that kinda goes into the whole compartmentalizing. But
Yeah. So we have chosen to compartmentalize and as an industrialized nation, but that's not how we're created to be
mhm.
necessarily. What I do find interesting, this is just me continuing to toot my own horn, is that as folks are talking about how they struggle to disconnect from work to be at home, I find myself struggling to disconnect from home to be at work because I
Mm.
work from home.
Right.
I had to move my desk to the garage
Mhm.
because I was in our bedroom and the baby would crawl up and grab me by the leg and forget whatever I'm working on. I don't give a crap about that. I'm going to pick up this baby. I'm going to
Uh-huh.
be on this meeting with a baby on my shoulders, and everyone's going to say that's so cute, and it is. But I don't like. I can't. I do bad work because that's not the most important thing to me. I'm doing it. It's important that I do it, but I struggle to disconnect from home to be at work, which is the opposite of a lot of the struggles of my coworkers.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's where, like, you would tend toward, like, if you were to feel guilt, it would be what you kinda described of, like, this call for men to be more present in the home, and
Hmm.
so therefore you would feel a slight sense of guilt and want to overcompensate and be more available at home.
Absolutely. I'd much rather feel guilty about work left undone than fatherly duties left undone because the work will still be there, but Zeke will only be six once.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah, and I'd say, like, it's interesting because early on when I was working, like my early 20s, I was just I was career obsessed. I was so driven, and like I just focused on work. We talked about work like every night. Like, I was always talking about the problems and the hurdles that I was working through and trying to troubleshoot and
And
all
I
the
was
things.
Christina obsessed, so I just listened to it.
Yeah, right? Well, you complain some because it's like, "Oh, do we have to talk about your work anymore?" Um, but so, like, and again, like, this is where like I didn't feel guilty talking about work because I wasn't paying attention at home. I was just so focused on work.
Hmm.
Like I would almost fall this is where we have the lovely gender reversal where
Hmm.
I was just focused
I just
on
want to stay home
chasing.
and bake bread and homeschool the kids. Okay.
Yeah, and I like want to have power and success in the workforce. And now,
Hmm.
I mean, that's like not really the case.
It's not how the world works.
It's not that I don't enjoy work and I don't enjoy life, but it's just kind of a change in
In fairness, at
perspective.
that time of our life, we didn't have kids,
Yes.
so that does change things a lot.
Yeah, and that's very true. Like, yes.
We're
So,
we're over the 20-minute mark, and I'd love for you to tell that story of how your paradigm shifted between being work focused to family
I don't
focused.
even know if that happened. I mean, it kind of happened, but
But
it's
by
so
the decisions you
gradual.
made,
Yeah.
it happened.
Yes.
Whatever your self perception of yourself, that might be different, and that might need to catch up. But the decisions that you've made over the last 6 years shows that yes, that did happen.
Yeah.
But that is a like maybe bonus episode unto itself where you just sit and tell a story.
Ugh, too much storytelling. That's not my MO.
It's in the past. Who cares? It already happened.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, well, with that, guys, yeah, work-life balance. Are you for it or not so sure?
Yeah, where do you fall? Do you fall more on uh, your heart being homeward and you're trying to balance work, or do you fall towards work and balance homeward? Do you ascribe to those gender traditions of men being more work focused and women being more home focused? Or are you swapped like we are? Let us know on our Instagram. It's at nuance_beauty. Christina's glaring at me. She's so sick of me saying this, but nobody's commenting on our Instagram. Dang it! So
We're gonna keep promoting
we're gonna
it.
keep promoting it.
All right, guys. Till next week.
All right, thanks everybody. All right, this is the part of the podcast where we recommend a book for this week.
Yes, and as a reminder, the intent is not necessarily to make this a book club or that you read every single book we suggest every week.
No, that'd be entirely too many books. All this is just coming from the fact that a lot of the conversations we've had and the conversations that we've wanted to share have come from books that we've read and topics that we enjoy. So, with all the books out there, sometimes it's hard to choose what you like. So, this is our contribution.
Yeah, and we generally hope that it ties in a little bit with the episode. For this week, I'd like to recommend Going There by Katie Couric. I actually I listened to this book. I did the audiobook version and it was read by Katie Couric and I very much enjoyed it. I think it shines a light into all the things that went into life and her career and some highlights and some lows. And fun random fact I'll share is while at the academy, I think second class year in the fall, we did a pumpkin or not pumpkin apple picking event, like a bunch of students from the academy. We did a team movement to pick apples and Katie Kirk was there with her family, and so there was someone who was like brazen enough to ask her if she would take a photo with all of us, KP kids, and we're all like, at least the younger classes are all wearing their USMMA gear. And I think us older class, like we didn't have to wear that gear. But most of the people on the apple picking event were plebes or freshmen, college. Um, and we got a photo. So that's my call to briefly seeing Katie Couric and had no conversation with her. I think I just jumped into the photo. But this book was wonderful. I would say I appreciated just a brief story or a mention about how early she had to get up in the mornings. Like there is a mention about how like, her limo driver taking her to Rockefeller Center, or I think that's The Rock, right? I think they call it The Rock. And it just being like 3:30 in the morning or 4 a.m. and she's trying to get the story in as best she can so that she can say her lines while she's getting her makeup done. And she talked about like fashion things and how appearance mattered so much, and trying to be a certain look and not be this other look. And so I think this book is it's a super entertaining read, and I think it ties in nicely to our episode with work-life balance. So if it sounds like something of interest, go check it out. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you aren't already following us, please follow us on your Spotify or Apple Podcast account. And look us up on Instagram at nuance_beauty. Until next week.